Laptop computer spins onto the screen, opens, and displays ATP Education Program webinar series, closes, and then spins off the screen.
Welcome to Section 7 of our modules. This one is going to discuss the cycle of assistive technology and how that can influence adoption or abandonment of the tools that we found for our students. Hello, once again, I am Sayard Bass, speech pathologist and assistive technology professional, and I will be walking you through this module. So the cycle of assistive technology is something that comes down a little bit more to process and how we handle things when we are working with students. The objectives for this part are to name the parts of an AT cycle and then describe how that works with one model of consideration. So we're starting to look at some of the processes that we put in place behind the scenes that can make adoption more likely once we get something to the student. So the reasons for using a cycle is that we know that technology changes, the student changes, so we need to make sure that we're staying on top of that. This is one way we can stay away from outdated equipment, as well as from changes in the student's environment or what they're expected to do in that environment. A very simple way to look at a cycle is something where we evaluate and find what we're going to use, adjust the plan if needed, implement it, and monitor it. And it just continues going around and around. There are several models that have been researched. I am a fan of the Johns Hopkins University model. Dan Cochran does a presentation about this, about how consideration is really beyond the student and beyond the tools. It's more of a problem-solving process, and I really like that terminology. And sometimes I'll even say to people, as the assistive technology coordinator, I'm more of a problem solver, I'm more of a project manager than I am an evaluator or a therapist. It's more that I'm trying to find what the issue is for the student, or looking here at the cycle up at that top, what's the problem, why it's occurring, what we're going to do about it, and then to see if it's working. We have our more traditional AT cycle down here in the what are we going to do about it phase. Consider, choose and trial, implement, and monitor. So it really is a bit of a simple breakdown, and I'll take teams through this because the principle for me is that this is not something that's going to happen just once and be done. Everything keeps going around in that circle because even if it is working, we want to make sure that we're ready to move on to that next step if all of a sudden we find that the student is progressing towards abandonment, or we do see a new problem, which is totally possible as the work tasks change. Another great tool for this is to go back to the SET framework, and that's to go through and ask yourself about all of these questions again. I am providing a resource with this presentation that gives you some handouts that can be great for sitting down with your team and discussing some of these SET tools. Though even just going through and asking yourself these questions, what are the students' current abilities? They could have changed over time. The needs might change. The areas of concern might change. We definitely know that the environment changes. For some students, this can change semester to semester, whereas for others, maybe grade to grade, or even unit to unit. There might be a unit where something is much more active and engaging, where students might be collaborating with others a lot more, and then that's replaced by a unit where the students have to do more independent reading or more independent writing. So we have to take a look how that environment and the tasks within it change. Those two kind of tie together pretty well. So those first three can definitely change within even a unit of a classroom or in the student's skills. That tools, that's another thing that often can crop up and surprise us. I know that at the beginning of the school year, it's always interesting to see because many companies have released updates over the summer. And for the teachers, it might be, okay, that button's in a different spot now, or it does this function now instead of that function, or there's a new function that's in there. And we can usually troubleshoot, problem solve, click around, But for our students, some of them might need more guidance to continue using their assistive technology. So keeping some of the questions here from the SET framework can also help us with guiding our students towards continuing use of their assistive technology. I'm a fan of always saying, is once a year enough to really look at what progress our students are making? We do quarterly updates in the majority of districts where we can say, okay, we've had 9 weeks of this. What kind of progress are we seeing? Are we not seeing the progress? Is there something we need to change? I would say that if we are seeing a change in the students' use, the sooner we can get on it, the more likely it will be that we can have a positive effect or a positive change. And then there's the question, whose responsibility is it to do those frequent check-ins? For me, it makes a lot of sense that if a student is using a tool in English class, it would be really great for the English teacher who saw them every day to check in. That we know with our students integrating into regular education classrooms, sometimes that might not be noticeable to the teacher. And if the student's a really great AT user, the teacher might not notice that they're using the tool, or the student might be using the tool at home. So it is something that should be outlined in that implementation plan, which we discussed, as to whose responsibility it is. But remember, from everything we've seen, having one person responsible is not always best practice, because people move around, people change, and you might get different perspectives from different members of the team. When you do these check-ins, it really does not have to be reinventing the wheel. It doesn't have to be a long process. I've had students that I can check in with in just 2 to 3 minutes at the beginning of a class, or even during class changing periods with some high schoolers. I might already have some objective data on what the student's been doing. So subjectively, I like to just say, hey, Billy, how's it going? Have you been using your speech to text? And then Billy can give me his answer. Yeah, so that's been working out for you. Have you found it's hard? Have there been any times when it's not worked that well for you? And just get some feedback from the student. Are there technological issues cropping up? Are there times when it really hasn't worked for an assignment? Is the student having trouble editing? Have a few probing questions ready, not too many, but make sure that you are getting that student's opinion, because the more often that someone can touch base with them and really listen and respect what the student is saying, the better we can move through this cycle and perhaps find either a different tool to match with the student if they're heading towards abandonment, or to help increase their skills if they are continuing to adopt that tool. We do want to make sure that implementation plan is being used, or that we notice any holes in it. If our plan was, if something's broken, we're going to go to the case manager and they'll put in an IT ticket, but that IT ticket is taking weeks to resolve, maybe we need to find another way to get a more direct line. If there are continuing issues, let's say that the student's device is not staying connected to the internet, it's something that might need to be solved on a higher level than just with that student or just with that one person doing a check-in. And we also have to remember that there are other models and strategies. Even if we do find something, implement it, trial it, monitor it, what can happen is it might still not fit. We might get some data in the trial that says, okay, we can give this a try, but it still might not be the best fit for the student. We might have to revisit that consideration process. I'll discuss that a little bit more in the next section, though we can take into account other models and other theories as far as what we could do to problem solve for the student. Down at the bottom, technology adoption. It's something that I referenced more towards the beginning, how you might have someone who's more of a tech enthusiast and wants to jump on the bandwagon for the newest thing, versus someone who might be more conservative or skeptical, which is where I tend to fall. I'm the Luddite assistive tech coordinator. I like to make sure that something's working and it's beyond being in beta before I put it in front of my students. But think about where the student is on that scale and if that's influencing what you're seeing. It might be the student wants to jump a little sooner on something new. It might be that the student is not someone who's very tolerant of some of the changes that might be continually happening with programs. There's also the SAMR model that's down in the lower right corner. This is used by instructional technology specialists a lot as far as how teachers can plan their curriculum. Do they want to substitute or augment the ways that they are teaching, or do they want to modify or redefine the task? And this is vocabulary that I think is really great to bring in to teachers, just to show them that there are other ways to get the student to engage, because it's not always 100% the technology that is holding the student back. And this is a great way to incorporate universal design for learning so that you might be able to reach other students in the class who might not necessarily qualify for a 504 or an IEP, but by given different means of engagement can make some progress. So it can help out our student who's using assistive technology. You can even use some things that are more universal. Like there are built-in speech-to-text and text-to-speech tools within the majority of operating systems, such as Chrome or iOS or Microsoft. So you can have other students try it out. It might not necessarily be assistive technology for accommodation of a disability, but it might be a way that they find more engagement and get more out of lessons. We can also think about some other models such as HAT, which is looking at the human activities that they're doing within a context. And notice it lists there's the physical, social, cultural, and institutional context. That institutional is one that we have a big influence on. Earlier, when we looked at factors for adoption versus abandonment, that adult opinion is going to matter. That teacher opinion is going to matter, whether the teacher says it in front of the student or not. Students are generally very perceptive if somebody is happy or not happy about something that's being used. And finally, we look at the context, thinking about person first. Really, the disability with the WHO model, we think about it more lying within the environment. It's more an issue with the environment than it is with the individual person. So we do start with that activity first, and then take a look at what we have as far as the student's body, their participation, motivation, their health, as well as other factors that are surrounding them. So by kind of expanding our mind and looking into other models, it can sometimes help us find something that might be hidden or not as obvious with our student when we are going through and doing our IEP. And as I said, it sometimes can lead to something that can benefit other students as well. When looking at process, I think the most important thing to remember is that you can't just take one tool and put it onto everything and have that one tool work. By continuing to move through a cycle and continuing to look at different models, maybe look at something through a different perspective, such as technology adoption or UDL, we may come up with other ideas, not just for the technology the student is using, but also how to implement that or to make it more universal where it might have the benefit of helping other students as well. So we've come to our bonus activity. What I would like for you to do is go and pick a model of consideration. It can be the one that your team commonly uses, or it can be one that you've been introduced to. If you don't have a preference, I would say use the SET framework. There are some handouts which will be included. And describe how it works within that model of consideration, implementation, monitoring, and moving on. What changes might you need to make to that model to make it practical for your team? Because I know that assistive technology, we don't have the luxury of sitting down with every student on our caseload and doing a full case review. The consideration materials, if there are people on the team who have the skills and knowledge to consider assistive technology and the different tools out there, you should be able to do it either in discussion or with the use of some of these worksheets. And I prefer the worksheets because then it's clear and it's written down for everyone. So in this bonus activity, you can do this individually. You can do this with a few members of your team. It could help you realize that, maybe there are a few tools to have in your toolbox for consideration versus just having one that you always default to. And hopefully by getting this cycle moving and keeping the circle turning, we can keep the students engaged and adopting their assistive technology.
Thank you for watching. For more information on the ATP education program, please visit our website at atp.nebraska.gov/education or email us at atp.education@nebraska.gov.